Standing up in McKinney. This is According to Callus, episode 661, coming to you on the 24th of June, the year of our Lord 2024, and it's time for a local show. That's right, it's McKinney Matters Monday. Well, something like that. I'll put a title up when I think of it, but I think that's what I'm going to stick with for today. In either case, we're going to focus on what's going on here locally. We'll probably throw a little bit of state stuff in just because for the foreseeable future, I'm not going to be able to do those 5 episodes that I've always, dreamed of being able to do. I've got I got extra stuff on my plate, and I need to figure out how to make it all work. And, as always, day job comes first. And I'm not going to risk screwing up my day job for a podcast. So in any case, here we go. Yes, so do me a solid. The show does no good if it doesn't get out, if people don't hear it. And I'm not necessarily looking for everybody to march in lockstep and agree with everything that I say. After all, the whole premise of the show is it's according to Callus. Therefore, what do I think? What do I see? And what are some of the implications of what's going on, all from my point of view. And because it's my point of view, occasionally I might get something wrong, or more likely than that, you're going to disagree. And I welcome, legitimate disagreement, open conversation. I meet plenty of people in real life who compliment me for the show and may say, well, I don't know about this, and that's perfect. That's great. That's what we want. We want to have an interaction. And when I say we, I mean we, the general public. We need the voices out there doing something other than the captured media, something other than, let's call them the rulers of our age. But when I say that, I realize that the more you do things, the harder you work, the more successful you become, the more there's some resentment, there's some success that should follow that, right? If you're doing things right, eventually you'll have some success, and people doubt your sincerity and they doubt what you're doing. That's frustrating. It's frustrating for me. It's frustrating watching it happen to other people. It's just difficult to comprehend how you can know somebody for years, work alongside them, and then suddenly they're your enemy. Just beyond me. Oh, well, I guess I've kind of gone off topic there, but going down that rabbit hole, Steven, stop it. All right. Like, share, subscribe to the show, right? Follow us, or follow me, if you will, on your social media of your choice. As I say, I've got a page and a group over at Facebook. I'm a pro at Gab. I drop in at MeWe, and for now, believe it or not, you can still see hear most of my programs over at YouTube. And the podcatcher of your choice, Spotify, Podbean, my host, Apple iTunes, Google Play Store, I don't know. Tune in, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, I imagine, or iHeart's Pod, whatever, pretty much anywhere. If it's out there, you can find it. And I'll keep doing this as long as I can. And, like I say, it's a labor of my love of my community and my country. All right. So on to the McKinney Matters, right? So we have a situation where every so often we do charter amendments. How do we improve the city? Now, I got to say, I often liken this as periodically it's good to go through, review the rules, which is kind of what the city charter is. Make sure that there's no glaring errors, nothing that requires an update. More often than not, you shouldn't find anything. I mean, if you did the rules right the first time, if you had good solid rules, which would be minimal and direct, you shouldn't have to be tinkering with them every couple of years. But be that as it may, every 2 years we go through it in the Republican Party of Collin County, the state Republican Party. So why would I expect anything different than the city of McKinney? It seems like we just did a revision on the charter. It was to change the recall provisions. And honestly, they were something that was past due, very appropriate. Now, unfortunately, or maybe it was fortunately, it was done specifically so they could target an individual. And quite frankly, love him or hate him, that individual did do his job to the best of his understanding, but he was a net negative to the city of McKinney. So in some regards, I'm grateful that the powers that be, if you will, within the city of McKinney decided that perhaps it was best if we put this guy to pasture, which is what they did. Now we're looking at another charter amendment. To my knowledge, the only thing of any consequence that is on the docket, I mean, they're going to review the entirety of the charter. But the premise, the main underlying reason is they want to redefine the term limits. Currently, you are allowed to serve 2 consecutive terms in a specific role. Now, most people would interpret that as you would serve 8 years on either the city council as a council member or perhaps as mayor. Some might even say, well, you can serve 2 terms on council and then run for mayor. Okay, and there's a little bit of a gray area, but I'm also believing that the wisdom of the masses, right, the general public will say, that person's been in office long enough. Thank you for your service. We want some fresh blood. We want some new ideas. That's always been my premise. Now, Allen had a guy in office for nearly 30 years who more or less ran the city. And you can say there were some good things that came out of that, and then there's some less good things. But that's kind of the premise. When you have somebody in power for too long, they don't change with the times, maybe. And then all of the big four, they have their leadership training program for the city. Now, whether you think it's a good idea or not, I will tell you, I can see a value add to that. I think a lot of it is propaganda, and a lot of it is, let's call it a nice side gig for people that work on that. But I think overall, it's a value add to the community and to the city. I think if people want to be in city government, they ought to know how the city works, who these people are at the city, and kind of get to see all these things firsthand. Now, granted, they only get to see the one side or the best presentation possible, which is why I would maybe say it's a little bit of propaganda, but that doesn't bother me. I think that it's a net add, and I know that we have it in McKinney. I think I'm 90% sure they have one out in Frisco, and Plano has one, and I believe Allen as well. And again, I think it's a little bit of gatekeeping, which again doesn't really bother me as a person. I would say politically, it's something I could either live with or just as easily live without. But if I'm one of the city fathers and I'm looking to recruit somebody that I can trust, that I think is going to do a good job, look out for what we've been doing at the city level, this is a boon. This is something I love. So I understand what's going on here, and I'm not offended by it. I don't think anybody should be offended by it. It's good to understand what's really at play. So what does that mean? By the time you get into office, by the time you get involved, you've got a certain amount of buy-in of what you expect and what they want you to do as a elected official or as a wannabe elected official, right? So I look at the charter amendment team. Now, I want to be clear. I know probably half of the names by reputation, and everybody that is on that charter review team has a very good reputation. I mean, there's a few people that maybe politically I don't align with them, but they have a good reputation. So in no way, shape, or form am I going after any individual on the charter review team, or am I disparaging them. So let's be clear about that right now. No, I think what I'm more interested in, how many of these people are already involved that have made up their mind of what they want to do beforehand. To me, that's a concern. If you're going to have a team go in, you want, at least in theory, the majority of them to have no strong feelings one way or another for something. You want them to go in with fresh eyes and an open mind. And I don't know that that's the case here. But then again, I'm not on the committee, nor did I ask to be on the committee. However, I do know somebody that is on the committee. And from what I've heard, initially the thought was on the charter amendment to revamp the term limits was roughly 90% opposed. From what I understand is there was a secondary follow-up to that where it's now 60-40 opposed. So I'm kind of curious as to how that played out. Or people being coy, or are they just being twisted in the background? So why does this matter, right? So I don't have to be a huge fan of any one elected official. I don't even have to be a huge fan of the actions of the council in and of itself. But I understand the council performs a service, and that service is in theory to the city, right? They're giving back, if you will. A lot of these people are successful and have done things in life, and they're now giving back, leading the city. I mean, that's a sales pitch, and we buy it. We buy it all the time. And again, I'm not opposed to it, and I think in theory it's great. But let me ask you, is 8 years enough time? If at the end of 8 years you haven't accomplished the majority of what you wanted to do, my first question would be is why not? The second question would be is pretty much every time I observe something at the council, the vast majority of the votes go something along the lines of 7-0, 6-1, maybe 5-2. So the reality is pretty much everything that gets put forward that's important gets passed through and is supported by the... Now, there might be things that never get brought up because there's not a solid rally against that. And I'll grant that. That's a possibility. But my question is, if after 8 years you haven't done the bulk of what you wanted to do and you haven't trained up your successor, what have you been doing? Because you knew you had a term limit when you got on. You knew that you had either 8 years at the city council, at the district, or at an at-large, or even the mayor. You've got your 8 years. So my question would be is what is so important, or why are you so important that you need more time? Now, what's also interesting is several members of the city council allegedly stated that, well, technically there's no term limits as it is because we can just run for a different seat. And we never have to leave the city council. Okay, and that makes sense. So you got a guy, Charlie Phillips comes to mind, who served his 2 terms at the at-large race, and now he wants to run to be the mayor. Okay, I get it. And if people are happy with Charlie Phillips as a city council member, they might be inclined to support Charlie Phillips as the mayor. Now, the difference between the mayor and the rest of the council is the mayor sets the agenda. The mayor has the bully pulpit, if you will, speaking on behalf of the city, and kind of directs the way things should go. Now, I'm not sure, because I don't know enough information, if my choice to support Charlie Phillips or somebody else is, going to be, that's a discussion to have later, right? But if you know somebody that's put in their 8 years and wants to run to be mayor, okay, you can start weighing that now. Did this person make an impact? Were you happy with what they did in the 8 years they were there? Should we consider them for mayor? I think that's a fair question. Same could be said if, say, Rick Franklin, who is on his second term, decides, you know what, I'm going to run for another term, but because I can't run in my district, I'm going to run for the at-large seat. And you could say, if you live in your district, hey, we liked Rick Franklin, he did a good job, nice even-keeled guy, did what we wanted. And I'm not saying that's true or false. I'm just laying out the argument here. We should go ahead and give him another term. Let's run him as at-large. So you can shift to being from a district to an at-large. And in theory, you could serve 2 terms at large. Now you've put in 16 years. And at that point, you could turn around, potentially run for mayor. And which would give you another 8 years, which would put you at 24 years working for the city. Now, I'm not certain that that's necessary, but there's a progress there, right? There's a process in place. So the only thing that comes to mind here is what's driving this is the mayor doesn't want to not be the mayor. It's not that the mayor has this overwhelming desire to serve the city, therefore he wants to stay on the city council, which I could wrap my head around, just like the two other gentlemen I mentioned, and I could see that. And I think it'd be safe to say that if our current mayor will say, I'm not going to run for re-election as mayor, I'm going to run for an at-large seat, he would crush it. Nobody would be able to touch him. He would, I mean, I can't think a single person would want to throw their hat in the ring against the mayor that's stepping down from being mayor to run an at-large seat. And I think it's safe to say he would immediately be elected the mayor pro tem. But the question is he willing to do that? Is he willing to step back? Because that's really what the charter amendment comes down to is, right? Can the mayor serve 3 terms as mayor? Now, if it's that important that we keep our mayor for 12 years versus 8, I mean, and if you're sold on that conceptually, that the city of McKinney cannot survive with the current mayor getting another 4 terms, okay, well then you know what you got to do. You go support that charter amendment. We'll upend what we've been doing for potentially decades here because we got this guy that you think we should change the rules for. Now myself, I'm going to be very gracious, and I'm going to say I believe George Fuller thinks he's serving the city well. I believe George Fuller thinks he's a good thing for the city of McKinney. And I would even go so far as to say I could make an argument that he is. I'm not sure that I agree 100%, and I think it would show a level of class and statesmanship if he were to say, you know, regardless of the outcome of this charter amendment, I'm going to exempt myself, because anybody that's looking at this charter amendment immediately knows this is really about the mayor wanting to stay mayor for another 4 years. I mean, what else should we conclude? Because the way it's currently written, it doesn't exclude or prevent anybody else from serving more time in the city council. It's just you can't keep a specific role. And the only role that really matters, is, from what I can see, is who the mayor is and whether or not the mayor is willing to, do another term as such. Here's the thing. I think that, and I did speak to another city council member, and I didn't use the person's name, and I agree with the theory that once you get into service of the city, or once you get into the service of the community, it kind of gets into you. It kind of gets in your blood. It becomes something that you really like and you thrive off of, and you want to continue to do that. And based upon the conversation with this person, and I kind of reflected that on another person who was also formerly in a role like that, who largely agreed with it. So I can very easily see that the current mayor would like to still serve the city. But my question is it more important that you serve as the mayor, or is it more important that you serve the city? Because if it's more important that you serve as the mayor, and we're changing the rules just so you can stay the mayor, in my mind, that's an issue. That's a problem. But if it's you're changing the rules because you think there are, or not you, but just the people in general think it's best to have people that can serve more than 8 years, and they think 12 is a better option, that's great. But right now, the only person that really benefits from that would be the current mayor. So I would ask, and I know it's going to fall on deaf ears, I'm pretty sure of that, but I would ask to clean that up, right? To clear that out. Do the classy thing. Say, look, you know what? I've done my time at mayor. I still want to serve the city of McKinney. I still think I have a lot to give to the city of McKinney. I think the people of the city of McKinney believe I have a lot to give to the city of McKinney. But rather than run for mayor, I'm going to run for the at-large seat. You still serve the city council. You still bring all the value that you offer to the city council. You're just not the mayor anymore. And if you say it's truly about the service, and if you say it's just in your blood, and you do that, I'll say this. Not only will I believe you, I'll set aside whatever differences we've had over the years and vote for you for an at-large seat. I'd even go so far as to say potentially endorse you if that's what you chose to do. I'm not going to promise that, but I would certainly consider it. You know, if there's just a really awesome other person that runs against you, now we're going to have a discussion, right? Is something going to be there? I make no promises, but I would strongly consider that, because that would show true leadership. That would show that you're not tied to being the mayor. You're doing what you think is best for the city, and what you think is best for the city is allowing for people to have 4 more years in a specific position, but not just for your benefit. I think that's a fair trade. And I think if that's what you're wanting us to believe as your constituents, that's something you ought to consider. And I say that knowing that we haven't exactly had the best relationship. And to be clear, I've not attacked you. I've not disparaged you. And I certainly haven't gone off script here. This is strictly about the political ramifications of keeping somebody in power or in another position for beyond the 8 years that has been kind of habit and accepted norm. I don't think it's too much to ask. I think it's a very appropriate and fair-minded way to approach this, and I think anybody that listens to what I just said would appreciate that. All right, now we're going to transition out of that specific topic and now talk about the idea of leadership. See, everybody understands and knows that we want good leadership. Leadership is hard to come by, and leadership that's willing to accept they have their limitations in the things that they don't know, right? The old adage from the Clint Eastwood film, right? A man's got to know his limitations. You've got to know where you're not a subject matter expert. You've got to know things that you aren't good at. And a leader should know that about themselves, and they should also be willing to bring people in on their team to work with them that have strengths that are their weaknesses, and vice versa, right? You're really strong on these things, so it doesn't matter that your helpmates or your lieutenants or whatever don't have the exact same traits. You want them to be strong where you're not. And I think that if we're looking at what's going on in the city, particularly in the local cities around us, and even at the county level, we can see this play out every now and again, right? I, for one, like the idea of having people that are really good with numbers and statistics being involved at city and actually school board and county level things, because they can see the numbers, they can read the numbers, and then kind of decide whether or not that's real or not real. And if they're truly committed to the numbers, they're a lot of times willing to set the political ramifications aside and focus just on the legit outcome of the numbers. Now, we all know statistics can be played with and you can manipulate what happens, but a good leader also knows that and says to themselves, or themselves, technically, themselves, right? We're talking about plural, but we're going to go singular here, right? They say to themselves, I understand this is what my preference would be, but the numbers show that this isn't getting the result that I would have expected. So perhaps we should consider doing this, or this to get the results that I would like to see. Again, a good leader knows their shortcomings or knows where there's something that's not their strength, but they also know when something is not working that they have to look at a different option. When you're not successful, and I'll just use a slightly painful example here, when you run a number of races and you lose roughly 2/3 of them, you probably ought to consider how you're running those races before you make any further decisions. And you should not be attacked, disparaged by the very people that you're leading by bringing that to their attention. Hey, we've been doing this for a while. It isn't working out. Let's look at some other options here. That's not dismissing everything. That's not saying everybody's terrible. It's just saying we're seeing the obvious here, which is we've lost. We need to assess and address how do we do better going forward. And some people get stuck in their ways or they want something specific, and they're not willing to disengage and look at the numbers. And that's what you need to do to be a good leader. All right. Now we're going to play a little bit of a game here. We've got both a little time and a lot of time, depending on how I want to play this. Going down to 3 episodes a week, I can potentially go 40 minutes, but I really like the 30-minute time frame. So I'm not sure exactly how this is going to play out here. So, in theory, the city of McKinney is going to have 3, actually, I guess technically 4 open seats this next cycle, if I remember correctly. Yes, 2025. If I did my math correct, we will have the District 4 City Council termed out. So that should be an open seat. We're going to have potentially 2 city council members running to be mayor, which would mean that both at-large seats, let me rephrase it. Yeah, one at-large seat would be up for contention, and the other, of course, then the mayoral seat would be up for contention, right? So you're going to have potentially 3 open seats. The guy in 2, Patrick Laitier, I believe, is good for another full term. And where's that 1 and 3? Let me put a pin in this for just a second. 2 and 4 was 19. So they should be 27. So 1 and 3. And 3. So 3 is likely to be open, as would the at-large seat. Because aforementioned, Charlie Phillips wants to run to be the mayor, and he would be termed out at the at-large seat. I've heard that somebody else might be considering running for mayor. I don't want to give a name because I haven't gotten confirmation. I haven't spoken to that person yet. And then you're going to have 1 and 3, which potentially are both incumbent-held seats. But I've also heard that one or both of them may not be running again. So you could have both of those seats open as well. So you might end up having 4 open seats. So then the question is, and this is where the game gets, do we find that there's a trade-off, right? Mayor runs for at-large seat holder runs for mayor, and then you essentially only have 2 open seats, potentially, maybe, unless they both run for re-election. And that solves that issue, right? You could go from having 4 seats wide open without incumbents to having essentially 0. And then it gets really interesting. Because as you've been following me, I've given kudos multiple times to Justin Beller. I think even though politically we're not aligned on some things, everything I've heard from people who live in his district, he's a good dude. And I say that in the colloquial sense that it's a compliment, a solid compliment. He listens to his people. He meets with his people. He focuses on numbers, and he does what he thinks is best come heck or high water. I would say that was one of the things I appreciated about Russ Feingold out of Wisconsin. He was elected senator, I think, just before I left. We would definitely be opposed on political issues, but he had some credibility because he stuck by his guns. Did what he said and said what he was going to do. And I can really appreciate that. Even if I disagree, I can appreciate it. It's respect. So, that being said, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Are we going to end up with essentially 4 open seats? Or are we going to end up with some switches and the 2 that are currently on run for re-election, in which case it'd be kind of a yawner election season at the city council. The school board's a little more interesting, but we're not going to invest any time in that right now. I do know that my buddy Chad Green is planning to run for re-election. Not sure who they're going to throw at him, but I'm sure they're going to come with all guns blazing on that one. I'm not sure I think that's fair or right. I mean, right now they've pretty much got a 6 one majority. I'm not sure what they're so afraid of. But they spend an awful lot of time looking to silence Mr. Green. And you can say what you want about his politics. You can say what you want about anything. But I want people that are willing to ask questions and look into things. And quite frankly, I want at least one person to say, yeah, I'm not good with that on any board. If for no other reason, to keep everybody else in check. All right, so I've done my little fun with the open seat thing, right? Okay, in closing moments here. We need to talk about some options, right? So presumably, sorry about that. Presumably the charter election is going to happen during the presidential election, which makes it even more dicey. So, but the option is, what's going to come out? What is going to be the recommendation from the Charter Review Board? This committee is made up by a lot of good people, at least by reputation. And I'd be surprised, quite frankly, if they want to make a major revision to the charter. But I also know that those people didn't get appointed to that review committee without some prior consideration. So, I mean, that's how it works with committees, right? You don't put people on a committee that, one, you don't trust, or two, aren't at least your ally. That's not how things are done. The other thing that we're going to need to talk about options are, right? We're going to have to look at a way to do things going forward to where we can be effective as Republicans and as conservatives. And certainly if you're a Christian and you're concerned about the direction and the future of our country, you're going to be left potentially with a choice of, well, let's just say one guy that has a checkered past versus another guy that has a checkered past and present. And it should be needing to be reminded. Oh, let me phrase this. Let's stop. I shouldn't need to remind you, and it probably should be said, we're not electing these guys to run our churches. We're not electing these guys to lead our families. We're electing these guys to deal with foreign governments and with the Congress. So by the nature of their existence, they're not going to be necessarily, quote unquote, good people. I'm okay with, honestly, an imperfect person doing a really hard job to the best of their ability and be fully committed to it. The problem as I see it is all too often we don't have good options. For my tastes, I would like better options, but that ship sailed in 2020. When we look at lower level down, we have an option. We get to keep the great Ted Cruz or vote for Colin Allred. In my mind, that's not even a close comparison. Again, uber qualified, highly competent Ted Cruz or the other guy. And I'm not going to say anything negative or disparage the guy. It's just, to me, it seems like it's such a clear-cut choice here. I don't know why we're even considering it. And they literally have to make things up about Ted for anybody to care. Just solid dude. Again, another compliment, right? All right, so as it stands right now, we don't know what's going to happen coming out of those charter amendment committees. We don't know what the recommendations are. I mean, I could make some bets and lose some money, but why? We know the importance of good leadership. We have new leadership in Colin GOP. We are planning on making some changes or improvements or working to get a better outcome. But it requires us all to remember we're on the same team. So hopefully the people that maybe get their feelings hurt will understand that and move on. It's politics. You cannot run politics by feelings. You have to run politics on facts, data, and outcome. If you're not winning, you're losing. If you're losing, it's really bad. And that's what we're looking at, folks. going forward, that's what we got to do. We got to focus at the local level. We got to see where we can work with the folks that are already in there, right? People that are Republican or nominally conservative, we need to quit treating them like the enemy. They're not. Yeah, maybe they're not perfect. Yeah, maybe they sign off on more apartment complexes or something than you're comfortable with. I get it. But if they share our values, if they're on the same book or the same chapter, we should at least hear them out. We should be working with them, not against them. Everybody is not your enemy. Find your allies, work with them, support them, improve them, encourage them. And with that, this has been According to Callus. I will see you on the other side.